Chapter 6, Post-Evidence Phase, Various Philosophical and Religious Questions. The subjects we will be discussing in this chapter aren't directly concerned with disproving the principle of evidence of belief, and that's why I named the chapter Post-Evidence Phase, because there could be something within a person's heart that is preventing them from believing, even though they know that the evidence for faith is true, and that the doubt they still have in their heart doesn't contradict the fundamentals of belief. This is a condition called emotional atheism, and I don't mean by it that the person's questions or skepticism are trivial, or that they don't require attention, but rather that anyone who has these questions or issues should examine them in the light of the evidence of belief they're already convinced with, letting these be the judge, and consequently being able to hold on to their faith despite the presence of such disturbances. But to do the opposite and start questioning the now established fundamentals of faith according to the aforementioned doubts is either emotional behavior or yielding to whimsical wishes, and can never be a correct logical behavior supported by reasonable justifications. On the other hand, I will discuss subjects that demonstrate the real ugliness and terrible contradiction of the irreligious thought structure, but I don't consider that this result can be solely relied upon as independent evidence for the fallacy of irreligiousness. Number 1. What is the answer to the problem of evil? This diagram 41 demonstrates the meaning of the famous dilemma known as the evil problem. The answer to the problem of evil. The first question, does evil exist? The Epicurean's design is 1, if yes, then, 2, if no, then. Our answer is yes. But God's creation of evil is not evil in and of itself, because it brings about greater good, which makes goodness the end result, and achieves higher purposes, such as people who deserve goodness, gaining it through having patience toward evil, resisting it, and struggling against it, or people who deserve punishment being subject to it through the sole means of their willful choice of doing evil. The second question, can God prevent evil? The diagram's answer is 1, yes, 2, no. Our answer, yes, he can prevent evil, as he's capable of everything. But he doesn't because evil contains necessary goodness, as previously shown. The third question, does God know about all the evil? The diagram's answer, 1, yes, 2, no. Our answer, yes, as he is knowledgeable of everything. The fourth question, does God want to prevent all evil? The diagram's answer, 1, if yes, why is there evil? 2, if no, then God is not good and merciful. Our answer, no, because if he prevented evil, those who deserve goodness wouldn't be able to gain the goodness contained in recognizing evil and resisting and confronting it. And those who deserve punishment because of their choice and their ability to commit evil won't be punished. Because if God holds someone accountable for an evil deed this person never wanted or willed, he wouldn't be just. And this shows that leaving room for evil to appear and be recognized is the way his mercy is given to people who deserve it. And his perfect justice is attained by punishing those who choose evil, unlike the way the diagram puts it. The fifth question, then why is there evil? The diagram's answer, 1, to test us. If God is all-knowing, he would know what we would do if we were tested. Therefore, there is no need to test us. 2, because of the devil. An all-powerful, all-knowing, and all-good God could and would destroy Satan. Our answer, yes, to test us, and for the wisdom we mentioned. And God knows what we would do because he is all-knowing. And he did not test us in order to know, as the diagram claims. But the reason for this test is to show, demonstrate, manifest those actual deeds, in order to show us from what we know that we did out of our true free will, that we deserve the assigned judgment, and not because of God's previous knowledge of what we would choose. So, the reason behind the test is to establish in our eyes the merit of whichever assigned judgment, and not to help an all-knowledgeable God acquire new knowledge which he didn't have. The sixth question, can God create a world without evil? The diagram's answer, 1, yes, 2, no. Our answer, yes. The seventh question, why didn't God create a world without evil? The diagram's answer, 1, to test us, If God is all-knowing, He would know what we would do if we were tested. Therefore, there is no need to test us. 2. To give us free will. Our answer, both to test us and give us free will, and for other wisdom too. And the objection to the first answer was already discussed in question 5's answer. The 8th question. Can God create a universe and give us free will without the existence of evil? The diagram's answer, 1. Yes. Then why didn't He create a world without evil? 2. No. Then God is not all-powerful. Our answer, no, yes. And no, no. Because this is a meaningless play on words, meaning that it's an inherently impossible question. And that's why they call it the loaded question. Because the true meaning of the question is, can God create a world and give us free will to choose between good and evil, but without free will to choose evil? So the question proves the existence of free choice to choose evil. Then it denies the need for its existence, which makes the end result 0. When these people bring a true question, then we can provide the answer. And here is an open question for them. Mention only one difference between good and evil from your atheist and materialist viewpoint. Number 2. The materialist solution for the problem of evil. Is it atheism or sadism? When a human watches the pain of the people and animals around them and their mental or physical suffering, they naturally experience pain and bitterness themselves because of it. This is called sympathy. They would want to help alleviate their suffering, even if it's at the expense of their personal comfort, due to the natural feelings of mercy and love of goodness God put in each human's heart. They might sometimes wonder why God didn't prevent this when He could, since He's all-powerful, and He is no doubt more merciful toward His creatures/servants than they are themselves. He is no doubt the most merciful toward His servants, for He is the one who installed the mercy in our hearts. The logical answer is that God has a natural will as well as a cosmic will. The first one means that God loves, and the second one means what God willed to happen in the universe. What happens in this world must have occurred in accordance with God's will, but not necessarily what He loves, because He could cause things He doesn't love to happen in order to achieve a certain wise purpose, like shortages of money, or food, or health and well-being, in order for Him to test these people and give them the free choice to perceive the goodness contained within those disasters, and to choose freely the ways to live good lives in this life and hereafter, and other logical reasons, which are correct and very logical to us as believers. But the atheist who loses their faith in God and goodness because of this problem, and who doesn't accept these solutions which Islam provides, falls into terrible contradiction. They on one hand deny God because they persist on not trying to understand what religion says, and insist that God loves evil, thus denying the existence of God, even though the problem of evil doesn't refute God's existence in the first place. And they refuse to worship Him, when they should have recognized looking into the meaning of evil itself, because if we love goodness and hate evil because of our instinctive nature, which we know to be true, by first knowing that God is the one who endowed us with this gift, and secondly because God did clarify in His message that He loves goodness and despises evil, and sent general and specific instructions to do good, promising that He will reward us with the best rewards as we do that. As for the atheist who lost belief in God and in His good intuition and the judgment day, who believes in nothing other than the material existence, they just have to look for better understanding of evil and the pain they themselves suffer when watching other humans and living beings suffer, and the fact they never want to hurt another, because this instinctive hatred of evil doesn't have any real meaning for a materialist point of view that they choose to adopt when they decide to become an atheist. Sometimes enjoying watching these evils can be more appropriate for them, and they start seeing this enjoyment as a form of adaptation with nature. And that's because Darwinism tells you that individuals struggle and fight with each other in order to achieve their personal gain. So, if the pain they experience when they're watching others suffering is genuine and deep, they are certainly more self-defeated and less adaptive and competent than sadists, who enjoy humiliating and punishing people or watching them suffer. And these are certainly behaving in perfect accordance with materialism and the Darwinian natural laws, Because conflict with others for personal gain, which is supposed to be the secret of life and the reason for its existence, certainly have negative consequences for others, as there is an association between personal gain and inflicting pain and harm on others. And sympathy with other people's suffering becomes an obstacle that must be gotten rid of. Sadism is, considering the damage that happened to others, is in itself a personal gain. And this is surely a sign of healing in the materialist doctrine, and the remission from meaningless metaphysical delusions, as sadism is the materialist viewpoint of life's good son, and the correct materialist solution for the problem of evil, because from this viewpoint, it's meaningless to hate evil and feel pain because of it. Why feel pain while we can benefit from the enjoyment of watching it and even participating in it? I hope every atheist will start to contemplate this matter well before they fool themselves and others, trying to convince everyone that the reason for their atheism is their excessive sensitivity and desiring the well-being of others, or what is generally known as the problem of evil, because that would be a terrible contradiction, as we clarified. And maybe that's the reason for the involvement of communism in killing millions of people, and the cruel horrors surpassing all expectations as the iconic leaders of atheism practiced what they believed in on real ground. People like Stalin, Mao Zedong, and others. When you experience genuine pain, and you really despise the horrors and the tragedies happening around you, you have only two choices. The first one is you listen to your intuition and human nature that tell you that evil is ugly, and recognize that those feelings you have were embedded within you by a power that also hates these things. And that is what Islam says. The second choice, you see the world from the materialist point of view and find that there is no legitimate justification for the pain and the desperateness you experience when watching others suffer. And there might even be legitimate reasons for inflicting this pain on others, or at least trying to push away the personal pain and replace it with enjoying and relishing these pains. And that is sadism. Either you become a materialist who feels pain when watching people suffer from evil and agony, atheist because of the problem of evil, and this is a meaningless contradiction. In other words, as each one of us contemplates evil, we are faced with two options: either be a believer or a sadist. But there can never be an emotionally sensitive atheist whose reason for becoming an atheist is the problem of evil. Number 3. Why are all the tragedies inflicting Muslims today? Isn't there any one of them worthy of empowerment? When you contemplate Allah's words, be He exalted, in Al-Qasas saying, "And the wife of Pharaoh said, He will be a comfort of the eye for me and for you. Do not kill him. Perhaps he may benefit us, or we may adopt him as a son." And they perceived not. Surah Al-Qasas 9. You begin to remember that there are other places in the Quran where you read the same words. In Surah Yusuf, "And the one from Egypt who brought him said to his wife, Make his residence comfortable. Perhaps he will benefit us, or we will adopt him as a son. And thus we established Joseph in the land that we might teach him the interpretation of events. And Allah is predominant over his affair, but most of the people do not know." Surah Yusuf 21. And this might make you want to know what kind of relationship exists between these two stories, and the location of the verses in these stories exactly. You soon begin to perceive a great secret about the laws of Allah which govern victory and enablement. This secret is the answer for the question, how is truth enabled to become victorious over falsehood? Which is also the answer for the question, why all these tragedies and hardships in the lives of Muslims? In the story of Yusuf, peace be upon him, we see that Allah, be He exalted, wanted to establish Yusuf in the land, and He did that by making him the offspring of one of the great kings in the land. No, I beg your pardon, please. This happened by making him a slave. Not only a slave, but also a prisoner. And when mentioning how he got to be a slave, Allah, be He exalted, said, "And the one from Egypt who bought him said to his wife, Make his residence comfortable. Perhaps he will benefit us, or we will adopt him as a son. And thus we established Joseph in the land that we might teach him the interpretation of events. And Allah is predominant over his affair, but most of the people do not know." Surah Yusuf 21. He established Yusuf in the land and enabled him to be a leader by being an owned slave? Yes, this is the means Allah chose to enable a human. Then when you look into Surah Al-Qasas, you find that Allah tells us about the criminal horrors committed by the Pharaoh of Egypt, and he, be he exalted, wants to establish those who were oppressed in the land, as he says, "Indeed, Pharaoh exalted himself in the land and made its people into factions, oppressing a sector among them, slaughtering their newborn sons and keeping their females alive. Indeed, he was of the corrupters. And we wanted to confer favor upon those who were oppressed in the land, and make them leaders, and make them inheritors, and establish them in the land, and show Pharaoh and his minister, Haman, and their soldiers through them that which they had feared." Surah Al-Qasas, 4-6. Very well. So the next verse will surely be a confirmation that Allah will send to the Pharaoh a prophet leading a great army behind him, to free those weak, oppressed people from his clutches, or to invite them for the truth. So if he refuses, he fights him and ends these troubles and afflictions the Pharaoh was causing, especially that Pharaoh used to claim that he is the true God, and exploit his authority and power to propagate that, and consequently ending his reign as part of establishing the truth over him and the ones who believed him. Not exactly. As you continue reading, you find the next verses as thus, "And we inspired to the mother of Moses, suckle him. But when you fear for him, cast him into the river, and do not fear, and do not grieve. Indeed, we will return him to you, and will make him one of the messengers." And the family of the Pharaoh picked him up out of the river, so that he would become to them an enemy and a cause of grief. Indeed, Pharaoh and Haman and their soldiers were deliberate sinners. And the wife of Pharaoh said, "He will be a comfort of the eye for me and for you. Do not kill him. Perhaps he may benefit us, or we may adopt him as a son." And they perceived not. Surah Al-Qasas, 7-9. How strange. Allah wanted to establish the Israelites in the land, so he sends them a baby boy. In addition, he sends him in the year the Pharaoh decided to kill all newborn boys. Then he inspires Moses' mother to cast him in the river if she fears for his safety, in order to be picked up by none other than the Pharaoh himself. This makes you stop and think. Everything is going in exactly the opposite direction of our imagination and expectations. Allah's prophet Lot, peace be upon him, also received victory in ways he never expected. He was visited one day by angels in the form of extremely handsome men, something which made him worry about the wicked ones and his people's terrible reaction if they see them. And the victory day was the same day he thought it was going to be the worst day in his entire life, because this time his people will terribly humiliate his guests. Allah, be he exalted, says, "And when our messengers, the angels, came to Lot, he was anguished for them, and felt for them great discomfort, and said, 'This is a trying day.'" Surah Hud, 77. The same thing repeats itself in Prophet Muhammad's story, praises and peace be upon him. As in this example, he was enabled to enter Mecca, after which people entered into the religion of Allah in multitudes, as Surah Al-Nazir depicts. When the victory of Allah has come and the conquest, and you see the people entering into the religion of Allah in multitudes, then exalt him with praise of your Lord, and ask forgiveness of him. Indeed, he is ever accepting of repentance. Surah Al-Nazir, 1-3. Entering Mecca was achieved with the Treaty of Hudaybiyah, which was a shattering earthquake for all the great champions of the Prophet except Abu Bakr, because of the terribly unjust conditions the Prophet, peace be upon him, consented to. And everyone who'd watch this event would think that it would be the end of Islam and the declining of its light. But Allah named it victory and sent down Surah Al-Fath, Surah of Victory. So praised be Allah, he made the Prophet victorious and established him in the land the same way he established other prophets before him, as if this is a basic divine law for strengthening and enabling the truth to conquer falsehood. And Allah knows best. Many benefits can be deduced from these lessons. 1. Allah shows his ability because if victory and establishment in the land happened according to normal causes, there wouldn't be any miracle or sign in enabling the prophets and messengers and people of truth to be successful leaders. Number 2. We have firm belief that Allah will eventually make truth victorious and nullifies the falsehood, no matter how strong and great evil seemed. So we never lose hope whatever the circumstances around us look like, as the day of victory might be the very day we think it's going to be the worst day of our lives. If not for Allah establishing this principle in the lives of the prophets and good people, we wouldn't have been able to benefit from that. Number 3. To realize patience as a way of worshiping Allah, which is the faithful partner of certainty in a Muslim's life, because patience is never an exceptional quality, but rather it's a virtue that Muslims always practice. We obey Allah patiently throughout our lives and teach ourselves to be patient by staying away from the things that displease Him. And we are also patient through painful hardships, which are Allah's gifts for us. A Muslim's life fluctuates between many degrees of patience, and that's why you find the Quran mentioning patience as a basic foundation in a believer's life, never departing them until they meet their Lord. The Quran also considers it the key to victory as shown in the Prophet's hadith. Know that with patience comes victory, and that with adversity comes relief comes, and that with hardship comes ease. This part is the answer for the question, why are there all these adversities inflicting Muslims today? And the answer is, if there aren't adversities in one's life, we wouldn't know relief, and there wouldn't be something worthwhile all the patience we exercise in the face of these hardships. And if realizing patience is one of the most important purposeful ways of life, then religion wouldn't make it the faithful friend of a believer in this way. And the eminent among the people of Pharaoh said, "Will you leave Moses and his people to cause corruption in the land and abandon you and your gods?" Pharaoh said, "We will kill their sons and keep their women alive, and indeed we are subjugators over them." Said Moses to his people, "Seek help through Allah and be patient. Indeed, the earth belongs to Allah. He causes to inherit to whom He wills of His servants, and the best outcome is for the righteous." Surah Al-Araf 127 to 128. Allah, be He exalted, says, "And we caused the people who had been oppressed to inherit the eastern regions of the land and the western ones, which we had blessed. And the good word of your Lord was fulfilled for the children of Israel, because of what they had patiently endured. And we destroyed all that Pharaoh and his people were producing, and what they had been building." Surah Al-Araf 137. He also says, "Those will be awarded the chamber for what they patiently endured, and they will be received therein with greetings and words of peace." Surah Al-Furqan 75. And also says, "And we made from among them leaders guiding our command, when they were patient and when they were certain of our signs." Surah Al-Sajdah 24. "Peace be upon you for what you patiently endured, and excellent is the final home." Surah Al-Ra'd 24. "Or do you think that you will enter paradise while such trial has not yet come to you as came to those who passed on before you? They were touched by poverty and hardship, and were shaken until even their messenger and those who believed with him said, 'When is the help of Allah?' Unquestionably, the help of Allah is near." Surah Al-Baqarah 214. "Or do you think that you will enter paradise, while Allah has not yet made evident those of you who fight in His cause, and made evident those who are steadfast?" Surah Ali Imran 142. "By time, indeed, mankind is in loss, except for those who have believed and done righteous deeds, and advised each other to truth, and advised each other to patience." Surah Al-Azir 1-3. "And when Saul went forth with the soldiers, he said, 'Indeed, Allah will be testing you with a river. So whoever drinks from it is not of me, and whoever does not taste it is indeed of me, except one who takes from it in the hollow of his hand.' But they drank from it, except a very few of them. Then when he had crossed it along with those who believed with him, they said, 'There is no power for us today against Goliath and his soldiers.' But those who were certain that they would meet Allah said, 'How many a small company has overcome a large company by permission of Allah? And Allah is with the patient.' And when they went forth to face Goliath and his soldiers, they said, 'O Lord, pour upon us the patience, and plant firmly our feet, and give us victory over the disbelieving people.' So they defeated them by permission of Allah. And David killed Goliath, and Allah gave him the kinship and the prophethood, and taught him from that which He willed. And if it were not for Allah checking some people by means of others, the earth would have been corrupted. But Allah is full of bounty to the worlds." Surah Al-Baqarah 249-251. "And how many a prophet fought, and with him fought many religious scholars. But they never lost assurance due to what afflicted them in the cause of Allah, nor did they weaken or submit. And Allah loves the steadfast. And their words were not but they said, O Lord, forgive us our sins and excesses committed in our affairs and plant firmly our feet and give us victory over the disbelieving people. Surah Al-Imran 146 through 147. Number 4. Is atheism an enemy of paganism, or is it its righteous offspring? For the first moment, some people would genuinely think that atheism is the product of our modern age, and that it has nothing to do with paganism, which was widespread in ancient times, because paganism is the worshipping of multiple deities, while atheism denies the existence of the Creator and many other gods. So these two would be totally contradicting. There are those who propagate this idea as one of the advantages of atheism, and portrays atheism as a necessary result and fruit of the increase in one's knowledge, and makes paganism parallel with the concept of religion and worshipping. So accordingly, as one gets to learn more about modern science, they naturally get rid of the concept of religion and servitude. But the truth is different, because atheism is a negative form of worshipping nature, by implicity, attributing all existence to nature, and this veneration is doubtless a form of worshipping, or positively with the presence of feelings of veneration for the forces of nature in one's mind, or continuously mentioning and announcing it, which is clear worship, and the latter group of people is known as pantheists, or believers in the unity of existence. And there's almost no difference between pantheism and atheism, but one must say that pantheists add a touch of beauty on their bitter atheist relief, because instead of trying to commit suicide after you find out that life is meaningless and that there is no creator, pantheism tells you not to do it. You'd better love and celebrate this fact. This touch is surely beneficial to the atheists, because atheism is a doctrine unfit for human consumption, and without a little beauty, things will be really tough for atheists. So atheism doesn't really do away with servitude and veneration for something, but rather, it's one of its forms. But the interesting thing about this is that the line of thinking has other different names, including sweet names like naturalist paganism. And these are also known as pagan atheists. And this is how their slogan looks, like figure 42, which implies that atheism and paganism are two sides of a single coin. An interested philosopher, Stephen Imris, says in one of his articles titled as, "Can Atheists Be Pagans?" that there is no problem for an atheist to be pagan, or for a pagan to be an atheist. And he cites an online survey about the definition of paganism, the result of which was that 87% of people considered paganism a form of veneration of nature, while only 10% think that it's a worship of multiple deities. The truth is, paganism in a deeper sense is really a veneration of nature, and symbolizing of natural phenomena in our understanding of them. For example, symbols of the sun deity, the moon deity, the femalehood deity, the war deity, etc., where all of these deities are involved in stories full of resentment, rebellion, fear, and greed, and other things in a scene that couldn't be further from true veneration of any god, and nothing like Islam's love and exaltation of God. The polytheists of Quraysh used to insult God, even though they believed that He was the Creator, and that He is one of the gods they worshipped. Allah, be He exalted, said, "And do not insult those they invoke other than Allah, lest they insult Allah in enmity without knowledge. Thus we have made pleasing to every community their deeds. Then to their Lord is their return, and He will inform them about what they used to do." Surah Al-An'am 108. And if you examine paganism closely, you find that it's a mixture of arrogance, weakness, rebellion, and begging. Because as humans know that they are weak, subjugated, and in need of help, whether from the natural forces subjected to humans by God, or His mind, or by lucky chance, or anything else. At the same time, he's very unhappy with his situation, and thinks that he shouldn't constantly be so weak or humiliated. Paganism is but a depiction of this epic scene, and the pagan human created those multiple deities so he can describe his inner conflicts. So it would be very naive of us to think that paganism is real veneration and worship of those deities, as these deities' share of veneration is only the share of human beings of weakness and need for help. Machines will play a significant role in this play afterwards, because a human gets to find an object onto which he can pour his wrath if he doesn't get what he wants, and also the symbol which he can use to express his pride and arrogance if he does get what he wants. As deities in paganism are but a mirror reflection of this human pride and resentment, and this is the same as the atheist viewpoint of nature. Nature conquers him, and gets angry and rebellious, and then he gets to have some of its bounties, and he celebrates and venerates it. So his mind and knowledge become great. Paganism and atheism are indeed two sides of a single coin. Or you could say that atheism is modern paganism. So atheism is not getting rid of authority and objects of veneration in reality. And also paganism is not the realization of veneration and exaltation of nature with their true meanings. If you look closely, you'd find that these two concepts are interrelated to a great extent. And you would see that today's atheism is but a repeated form of centuries-old paganism. The best figurative embodiment of this paganist atheist scene, full of resentment, pride, rebellion, and humiliation at the same time, is depicted in the words of O Fortuna, which is one of the first scripts of the poems of Carmina Burana, figure 43, which are a group of anonymous paganist poems dating back to the 13th century. The poems are filled with debauchery, heresy, wine imbibing, women and sex. But the first part of these, called O Fortuna, describes the problem of evil, the most famous reason for atheism, in the form of addressing the deity of fortune, Fortuna, of Greeks and Romans. And it's a paganistic speech directed from worshippers to their deity. In it, the vast difference between the concept of worship in Islam and the concept of worship in paganism. A speech filled with insults and hatred and belittlement of that God. And at the same time, a depiction of the problem of evil in the atheist manner. And many of us might recognize this poem, but we never really searched for the meaning of its Latin words. As since Karl Orff composed the music for some of Carmina Burana's poems in the 30s of the last century, it has become one of the most famous cantatas of epic music in the world. Number 5. Why do we say that there can be no morals without religion? There can be a theist without ethics. But these ethics have no root in atheism. In other words, if there is a believer who has bad manners, then his behavior is inconsistent with his religion. But if an atheist has good manners, then he's inconsistent with his philosophy in life, because there is no logical reason in his philosophy for one to have good manners. And if each human is born with a great reservoir of good manners embedded in their natural intuition, then an atheist should get rid of this unjustifiable reservoir just like they get rid of any unjustifiable primitive thought stuck in their head. Because getting rid of primitive and unjustified manners or thoughts is a requirement of atheism. And Prophet Muhammad never said that he was sent to make people start to have ethical values. But he said, I was sent to uphold the perfect ethical values. As religion justifies keeping these ethical values, it gives them purpose and deeper meaning. And it's the source that clarifies the detail of general ethical values and encouraging them. And this fact has many facets. Number 1. If God didn't exist, then there wouldn't be perfect truth. Everything will be relative because there is no fixed reference for anything abstract. Number 2. If the day of judgment doesn't exist, then commitment to ethical values can be very understandably described as stupidity and foolishness, because then this life will be everything we've got. And that's why Allah, be He exalted, said of those who don't believe in the judgment day that they won't feed the poor, nor would they take care of the orphans. Have you seen the one who denies the recompense? For that is the one who drives away the orphan, and does not encourage the feeding of the poor. Surah Al-Ma'un 1-3. And Allah, be He exalted, also said, and they give food in spite of love for it to the needy, the orphan, and the captive, saying, we feed you only for the countenance of Allah. We wish not from you reward or gratitude. Indeed, we fear from our Lord a day austere and distressful. Surah Al-Insan 8-9. Number 3. If a religious legislation that provides humans with detailed instructions for the correct ethical behavior in a certain situation, or any application of life that they don't know much about, a person could unknowingly participate in the destruction of the very things they want to repair. They might even kill and destroy, thinking that what they're doing is exactly ethical or correct, and that they are doing the right things. Number 6. What did religion give to humanity? Number 1. They made them learn the difference between themselves and animals governed by nothing but their instincts. Number 2. It ordered them to establish justice, and with good conduct, and giving to relatives, and forbid immorality, bad conduct, and any form of destruction or oppression. Number 3. It gave them the only true way to gain the contentment and support of the Lord of the worlds, and enter his paradise in this life and the hereafter. Number 4. It taught them the reason for their creation, who created them, and what destiny is awaiting them, and saved them from the nihilist thoughts surrounding them, which devoid life of any meaning, because the result is one, dying and turning into a pile of dust, as there is no meaning to anything we could do in this life. Number 5. It gave them the Quran, which contains the medicine for every mental struggle and a cure for every destructive lust, turning humans from sick slaves of their lusts into sound people who are able to see the truth. Number 6. It gave them everything they need in order for them to know the most important truths, and the lack of need of any other source of information about their inner worlds and what's happening around them, and guided them for the worshiping ways to solidify and increase faith, and forbid them from doing the sins, because sins harden the heart, causing them to be blind from the truth. Number 7. It told them that if good things come to them and they are thankful and humble, then those things will be increased. And if bad things happen to them, they must be patient and never lose hope, all the time consoling them and telling them to expect good things if they are patient. On the opposite side, what did atheism and irreligiousness give to humanity? Number 1, it told humans that they are animals just like the rest of all the other animals, and that there is no real existence of things like mercy, chastity, abstinence, or good or evil or any humane meaning, as these are empty metaphysical things. Number 2, it told us that there is no God who guides us or mercies us or listens to us or to hold us accountable for the deeds we chose to do, as both the killer and the victim are equal, and unjust and the oppressed are equal, and the sane and crazy are equal, and nothing in life has a meaning, nor is there support or help or reference they could refer to. Number 3, it gave us a product that's unfit for human consumption, which sound minds and souls despise and shrink from. In all ages, some of them even had to worship idols, rats and mice, running away from the harsh loneliness they experience after the devil drove them away from the path of the one God and the religions of the messengers. Number 7. Which is more comprehensive, humanism or Islam? Islam is doubtlessly much more vast and inclusive, as there is not a single virtue out there which Islam didn't encourage. Humanitarianism is a part of Islam, but Islam has much more to say and give. For example, it tells us that we are servants of our Creator, the greatest honor for humanity, and teaches us the best way we can contact with our great Creator and serve Him truly. Islam presents us with the best principles to purify ourselves, physically and spiritually, to keep ourselves and our society safe and prosperous, preventing us from doing evil and destructive things which we sometimes do, thinking that these things serve good purposes, while in fact they open doorways for unimaginable horrors and destruction. Without religion and the knowledge that we have life after death, there would be no meaning for humanity, or good or evil or life itself, because all life is meaningless from a pure materialist point of view, and humanity and ethical values will turn into valueless delusions. Number 8. Why would genius people and those who serve humanity be tortured in hell? Most people who serve humanity and their geniuses and achievements without faith in God did what they did not for the sake of God and humanity, but out of selfish desires to achieve personal gains, to be recognized among people as good and intelligent, or to be popular and gain a lot of money and fame. And they indeed had what they wanted. As Allah said, "Whoever desires the life of this world and its adornments, we fully repay them for their deeds therein, and they therein will not be deprived. Those are the ones for whom there is not in the hereafter but the fire, and lost is what they did therein, and worthless is what they used to do." Surah Hud 15-16. He also said, "And for all there are degrees of reward and punishment for what they have done, and it is so that He may fully compensate them for their deeds, and they will not be wronged. And the day those who disbelieved are exposed to the fire, it will be said, 'You exhausted your pleasures during your worldly life and enjoyed them. So this day you will be awarded the punishment of extreme humiliation, because you were arrogant upon the earth without right and because you were defiantly disobedient.'" Surah Al-Aqaf 19-20. And if these people have contributed to our progression and well-being, we do owe them a lot. But in front of God, they are more to blame than others, because He bestowed on them and favored them with more knowledge and understanding than all others. But they exchanged this favor for ingratitude and refused to thank Him, and even denied His existence altogether. And they attributed these achievements to themselves out of pride and vanity. Number 9. Why does God create us for venerating and worshiping Him when He doesn't need anything? Isn't He self-sufficient? The error in this understanding is a result of the erroneous thought that the purpose of any action is only either to gain a benefit or do away with harm. Otherwise, it would be a useless action. This is an erroneous measurement, because in truth, actions are necessary requirements of the existence of a self. If the self is perfect, then its actions are a necessary requirement and a result of its perfection. And if the self is imperfect, its actions are necessary requirement and a result of its imperfection. And as imperfection always seeks perfection, the desired purpose is refining the self by acquiring better qualities and getting rid of harmful ones. Anything else is just complete futility. A perfect self is always in a state of giving and establishing goodness. The desired purpose here is not restricted to acquiring personal benefits for the self. Gaining benefits could never even be part of the purpose. So why does God do things like creation, giving management, infusing life into things, or taking lives and causing death? The answer is that God acts in perfect accordance with His best names and supreme qualities, and we act in accordance with our qualities of imperfection and limited ability. For example, when I ask you why you acted in a certain way, you would tell me that you did it in order to gain something, a pleasure, or a benefit, or to do away with a harmful thing. To us, this is perfection. But in actuality, it's imperfection, because needing something is a lack of something in your life, or self, and this is imperfection and limited ability. Or maybe you'd say that you did something just for the sake of it, without a certain purpose. Acting meaninglessly is imperfection in itself. That's why I can describe any action of any living creature as imperfect, because this creature is fluctuating between two states. Both of them are imperfect. The first state, their action is purposeless. This is fooling around, and fooling around is an imperfect quality. The second state, they do it for a purpose. And for any creature, that purpose is a need of something, in order to either acquire something beneficial or do away with harm, so they can fulfill a certain need, which is itself lack and imperfection. But when it comes to the Creator, on which basis do we apply to Him the same rule and think that He's acting for the same reasons we do? Is He a creature like us? Is He weak and in need like us? We already proved that He's perfect and self-sufficient. The answer is that He acts in accordance with His qualities and not ours. And all these qualities are ones of perfection. For example, He is generous towards you and bestows on you good bounties, because He is bountiful, and is just towards you because He is just, and so on and so forth. These actions are not a fulfillment of self's needs, but they are extensions of His perfection, the influences and requirements of His qualities. He created us so we worship Him, but it's us who need to worship Him for our own well-being and happiness, and He doesn't need us to worship Him, because He is the self-sufficient, the laudable one. And it's not logical to think that a self-subsistent God needs anything, or needs this worshiping. While He created both the worshiping and the worshipper, He created us and the very capability and the willpower with which we worship Him. Number 10. Can God create a rock which He can't lift, or can He create another creator like Him? God is capable of everything. Anything that can be inherently impossible, i.e., impossible to exist in the first place, is not a thing. It's just an error in the imagination of the one who asks this question, and it's a meaningless question, as if the questioner never did ask the question, and at the same time demands the answer, because the question is meaningless in the first place. If a questioner asks me, name something that's both eternal and an event, I would say to him that their question is illogical and meaningless, because the quality of eternity is in direct contradiction with the quality of occurrence, and the two qualities can exist together in anything in the world, as that is only an error in understanding. And what you're asking about is not a thing in reality, and it's not even a thing in the mind. That's why it has nothing to do with God's capability of everything, because God is capable of everything. So is the question, can God create something like him? The meaning of this question is really, can God, the Creator, create a God like him? God is uncreated. Truth is that this question has no meaning in the first place, and so answering it is impossible. It's like you trying to prove something by negating it, and consequently, the result is zero. 1 minus 1 equals 0. Because how will this second God be a creator like God when he was created by God? And this is the same as our question here. Can God create a rock which he can't carry? Because in order to be able to carry it, his capability must have limits which it can't surpass, despite the fact that in order for him to be capable of everything, his capability must have no limits. The meaning of this question is equivalent to, is God capable of being capable? It's like saying that he who is perfect is imperfect because he couldn't be imperfect. This is just a meaningless playing around with words in order to confuse the meaning, because the inability to be imperfect is not an imperfection in the self, but it's rather perfection itself. Number 11. How do we answer Euthyphro's dilemma? Euthyphro's dilemma is proposed for the purpose of denying that God is the source of morals and ethical values. It says, is what is morally good commanded by God because it is morally good, or is it morally good because it is commanded by God? If you say that God commanded it because it's morally good, then things that are morally good can be good in themselves independently of God, and consequently God is not the source of morally good things. And if you say that what's morally good is good because it's commanded by God, then this devoids good and evil of their meaning, and they become delusional and untrue things, thus canceling the value of morals itself. And our answer is, God commanded moral goodness because it's good, and because it's beneficial and right and wise, because God's actions and his wills are in accordance with his knowledge and wisdom, and with his qualities and names. Allah said, and you do not will except that Allah wills. Indeed, Allah is ever-knowing and wise. Surah Al-Insan 30. Associating his will with his knowledge and wisdom. As for the context of the dilemma, which implies that this means that good morals are independent of God, and that God might not be the source of them, or that he is the one who bestowed goodness on them, is a great confusion between actual and abstract existence of things, as goodness and good qualities are abstract meanings in the mind and not things that have material existence in reality. The dilemma in reality is a question that creates the delusion that there is something that has a material existence, which God didn't create, and that this thing is called goodness or morality, and anyone who wishes to be moral can do so by taking part of this material being. And this is unquestionably a silly and futile imagination. There is no material being that needs to be created, so we can wonder whether God had created it, or found it out there so he loved it. But rather, the existence of all meanings, whether they are good or evil, or wise or meaningless, or beautiful or ugly, the existence of all these qualities are established in God's knowledge since eternity, and not an existence of separate and material selves. This destroys the notion that they have independent existence, because they have only real existence in reality, because of God's knowledge of these meanings. And as for the embodiment of these meanings in reality, if this is of God's qualities or his actions, then it isn't created, and if it's not, then it's a creation of God, be he exalted. So, in our search for the origin or source of morals or meanings or values, we shouldn't fall into fallacies, deluding ourselves that we are searching for the cause of the existence of a thing, a separate self called meaning and morality, because if we did, the answer would be 1. There is no reason. So this self is eternal and independent of God. God is not the source of these morals. 2. This self has a cause, i.e., God created it, and so its existence is possible. And we can imagine that God could have created it differently. Morals are good because God commanded them. Both options are wrong. Because from the beginning, they fell in a fallacy we created for ourselves. That is the imagination that we are speaking of, a thing that has external and independent existence. The correct approach is to firstly know that the existence of morals is mental and abstract. Then we look afterwards for its source and find that morals are true in themselves, and that these meanings have been established since eternity, inseparable from the Creator and His attributes and knowledge. Number 12. How can a disbeliever get punished for eternity based on a finite lifetime? The questioner's measure of justice is to make the period of sin equal to the period of punishment, as if justice can only be established if the two periods are equal. This is an erroneous assessment, because punishment has got nothing to do with the period of time one spent doing a crime, and everything to do with the atrocity and ugliness of the crime. And no sane person doubts that, because there are many examples in our lives that show that it's completely insensible to adopt such an erroneous judgment by making the period of punishment equal to the period during which the criminal was free to do the atrocious things they'd done. This is even applicable in the relations between cause and effect in general, and not just punishment. If a car driver whose attention to the road is distracted for a few seconds, this could cost them their lives or the lives of their families and also others forever. A high school test lasts for only a few hours, but it determines the entire course of the students' lives afterwards. Also, when a man could kill another man in a few seconds, can we put the killer in prison for a few seconds? Of course not. He could spend the rest of his life in prison because of this crime that lasted for a few seconds. So what greater crime in this world that God created and ordered us to worship Him, sending the messengers and the messages, than the crime of someone who understands all of this, then chooses to reject everything? Number 13. Why can't the disbelievers just turn into dust and become nothing after they die, instead of going to hell for eternity? We can put this question differently as thus. Isn't it fair if a disbeliever's life just ends with their death and they become equal to animals which will turn into dust on the judgment day, or just become nothing, as any nothing else God didn't create? The answer is no. That is not fair at all, because the disbeliever committed a crime, while animals and the uncreated things didn't commit any crime. So, equality between them can't be justice. But what about mercy? Answer: no mercy for them, because they don't deserve it. Not because of lack of God's mercy, be He exalted, but because the disbeliever never asked for mercy at the time they should have asked for it, that time being this lifetime. The disbeliever doesn't really want the mercy of the most merciful Creator. Otherwise, they would ask for it, doing the things that were available to them which were in their capacity to do. There is no wonder, then, that those who refuse God's mercy won't find any mercy, because there is no source for mercy other than God's, which they missed while they were equipped with perfect capacity and free choice. This is really a great and fearful scene, which when contemplated makes one deeply feel the meaning of, there is no God but Allah. He alone exists without partners. 14. Why do Muslim imitators, e.g. being born in a Muslim family, go to heaven, unlike disbeliever imitators? Firstly, the survivors are ones who die as Muslims, and not whomever was born in an Islamic environment. And the difference is huge, because dying as a Muslim is success bestowed by God upon those who have goodness in their hearts, and it requires succeeding all temptations to disbelief in God during their lives, which everyone is subject to. Allah be He exalted said, "Do the people think that they will be left to say, 'We believe,' and they will not be tried? But we have certainly tried those before them, and Allah will surely make evident those who are truthful, and He will surely make evident the liars." Surah Al-Ankabut 2-3. That person who passed all trials didn't do that with the help of mere imitation, as the question portrays, implying that imitation caused the survival of others and the doom of others at the same time. Imitation is never enough at times of trial. Those survivors doubtless had other tools very different than imitation, and those tools don't have to be deep knowledge and intelligence, as restricting belief to abilities of deep understanding is one of the sophistries of al-Kalam philosophers. Faith has many diverse paths, and the simplest of people can have faith because of their pure and unperverted intuitive nature, or because of their true love and veneration for their Creator, and refusal to set partners with Him. or because of other gentle guidance that God puts in their hearts, or certain situations they encounter in their lives which make them experience the presence of special care and attention very closely, or by answering their prayers, or many other ways. Deep study and intellectual knowledge of the evidence and inferential methods is useful for one who's engaged in discussions and answering arguments more than it's useful for filling one's heart with faith and tasting the sweetness of belief. And not all people get engaged in intellectual battles over religion, as God chooses to each one of us the kinds of guidance and trials and challenges suitable to each one's nature. As Prophet's Hadith says, tribulation will be presented to the hearts of people like a reed mat woven stick by stick, and any heart afflicted by them will have a black mark put into it, but any heart that rejects them will have a white mark put into it. Thus there will be two kinds of hearts. One is pure, like a white gemstone, and it will not be harmed by any tribulation as long as the heavens and the earth endure. The other is black and dusty like a worn-out vessel, neither recognizing good nor rejecting evil, but rather immersed in its desires. Secondly, no one will enter hell unjustly. Those who have no knowledge about the message are pardoned, and they are tested on the judgment day, as shown in the Prophet's Hadith about those who are insane, deaf, or too old, and those who die very young, and the people who weren't alive when the messenger came, or received distorted versions of the message. But as for those who received the message clear and undistorted, and this means that they received it in a way that's suitable for them, not needing to imitate or get the support of anyone else, then they reject it and choose to disbelieve, for fear of confronting their people, for example, or for fear of losing material gains or anything else of worldly gains, or for deep hatred for God or His religion, or any other reasons to disbelieve. God misleads them even more, because they refused the truth at the time they knew it was true. Allah be exalted says, "And we will turn away their hearts and their eyes just as they refused to believe in it the first time. And we will leave them in their transgression, wandering blindly." Surah Al-An'am 110. Number 15. How can a person have free will when they only do what was already known and predestined by God? Firstly, there is no connection between knowledge and predestination. Even in our human lives and with our limited knowledge, we are able to predict some of the future events. And they indeed happen, even though we didn't deliberately influence their course. If we, creatures with limited ability and knowledge, can do that, so how about the vast knowledge and arrangements of God? Secondly, humans are possessed of free will and the faculty of distinguishing good and evil. Otherwise, it would be unfair to address them with laws. Nor would it be just to hold them accountable for their deeds, to be rewarded with heaven or punished by hell for deeds they weren't able to choose. On the other hand, if a human's willpower and abilities are independent of God's capability, humans wouldn't be subjected to God, as everything God wills must happen, and everything He doesn't will can never happen, and nothing happens in His kingdom against His will. Because His perfect supremacy and sovereignty are perfect, combining between free will and God's supremacy could seem contradictory if we imagine that God needs to take away our free will in order for us to act in accordance with His will and wisdom. But if we remember that He's capable of everything and that He doesn't need anything in order for Him to do something, when we know that He isn't compelling us to do anything and that He doesn't take away our true free will so His will be done, and this is perfect justice. And because of His perfect capability, He was perfectly capable of creating free will in His kingdom. God is capable of giving us free will and doesn't need to take it away in order to achieve His will, because He doesn't need anything, and because He's capable of everything. If we rid ourselves from comparing God's perfect capability to the imperfect capability of His creation, the problem is then solved. God wills. And maybe this is what made some of the first Muslim generation, Salaf, say, destiny is in God's capability, and God knows better. Number 16. If God's capability is manifested in His creation, then where was His capability in eternity? This is a confusion between epistemological knowledge and ontological knowledge, and there is a big difference between the two. For example, our knowledge of the law of gravity didn't cause the law to exist. The law exists whether we know it or not. When we learned about gravity, our knowledge increased, but the power of gravity didn't increase, and our knowledge didn't cause it to appear suddenly. So are the qualities of the Creator, be He exalted, and to Him are the best examples. The existence of his attributes are as eternal as his existence itself, and their perfection is inherent whether we see that or not. The Creator is capable of creating, and is capable of everything, even if he doesn't create anything. The existence of creatures is a manifestation and expression of this perfection, and an acquirement or bringing this perfection into existence. A car is called a car at the moment it's assembled, and before it moves 1 meter, because it can move, and its movement is an increase in our knowledge, and doesn't increase its ability to move. Likewise, a computer is called a computer at the moment it's made, even if it hasn't done any mathematical calculations yet. And if we choose to do complex mathematical calculations, this increases the benefit we have from the computer, but it doesn't increase its capability of calculations. God be he exalted is absolutely perfect, and this perfection is not something that increases, but rather it's people who benefit from his perfection, and their knowledge of his perfection increases as they learn more about themselves. This human knowledge doesn't increase his perfection and doesn't establish it. Number 17. Is there a conflict between Islam and experimental science? In this figure below 44 we see the book cover of Selenografia, a book by the Polish astronomer Johannes Hevelius, written in the year 1647. It symbolizes the rising of the sun of the experimental scientific method in the Middle Ages, with its 2 extensions. On the left is rationality, as represented by the Arab scientist Alhazen, holding a geometrical drawing, and on the right, sensation, represented by Galileo Galilei holding a telescope. And even though experimental scientific method is considered a given fact, an axiom in the minds, and its discovery can't be attributed to a specific person, that's why we find in ancient Egyptian papyrus, for example, a diagnosis for various ailments, and the prescription for the suitable remedy for each ailment, like Eber's papyrus, figure 45, and also engravings representing medical and surgical tools on the temple of Kam-Ombo, figure 46. But Muslim scientists like Al-Hasan ibn al-Haytham, al-Khwarizmi, Ibn Hayyan, al-Razi, al-Kindi, al-Biruni, and many others had great contributions to the scientific establishment of the modern renaissance of the experimental scientific method, which can be denied only by the ignorant or people with agendas, as admitted by the objective Western scholars themselves. This invalidates the illusion that implies that Islam contradicts modern experimental science, or that modern science pioneers are exclusively atheists and irreligious scientists. Number 18. What is the advantage of reliance upon God and not employing the necessary means alone to reach our objectives? You often hear someone say that if a human wants to do something, employing the necessary means to reach their objective and relying on God will certainly succeed. But if they employ those means too, but without relying on God, they will also certainly succeed. So what is the use of relying on God? To answer this, the problem which some people fall into is their thinking that relying on God is an alternative for employing the means necessary to reach a goal. And that is untrue, as God ordered us to employ means, because He created a world of cause and effect relationships. And He also ordered us to rely on Him, in order for us to always remember that He, be He exalted, is capable of everything, and this is the owner of everything. The means could be available, but at the same time useless. And other times, the means might not be available, but God wills an unexpected source of help, which might not even be so useful in ordinary times. But they become useful at the time of need, because God willed so. This happened a lot, not only in the lives of the prophets, but also a lot of righteous and good people, where victory or the solution to a problem appeared while the necessary means are almost non-existent. Islam encourages us to look for and employ the right means, just like all materialist doctrines do. But Islam added something important that gives us the dominion over nature, instead of being helpless slaves of nature. This addition, which is the difference between us and the atheists, is that if necessary means don't exist, this means worshippers lose every hope, unlike believers who rely on God, who don't lose hope and never despair, but they exercise the highest degree of patience. The other problem related to this subject is that some people deal with reliance on God and prayers as a given, something that God has to do for His servant. Not just that, but also in the same way this person requested and without delay as well. And this is a great mistake, because reliance upon God means the delegation of the matter to God. and complete surrender to Him, seeking His help and gratitude for His will. Prayer, too, is honest supplication to God, and a true servant is all the more humble when the answer for their prayer is delayed, and not more angry and bored whenever the answer is late. Number 19. Why do intelligent people go astray if religion is so clear and irrefutable? This is the core of the hateful blind imitation and following of masters and authority, unfortunately, and it's one of the greatest tests. Allah said, "And we did not send before you, O Muhammad, any of the messengers except that they ate food and walked in the markets, and we have made some of you people as trial for others. Will you have patience? And ever is your Lord seeing." Surah Al-Furqan 20. And God often gives us glimpses of the kind of conversation that will take place in hell between the masters, people of any authority, kings, presidents, religious scholars, and even science pioneers, and the ones who followed them blindly, where the followers blame their masters and dignitaries, because they rejected God because they followed them. Allah, be He exalted, says, "The day their faces will be turned about in the fire, they will say, 'How we wish we had obeyed Allah and obeyed the Messenger.' And they will say, 'O Lord, indeed we obeyed our masters and our dignitaries, and they led us astray from the right way. O Lord, give them double the punishment and curse them with a great curse.'" Surah Al-Ahzab 66-68. It's of God's blessings upon people that the foundations of faith in God are established at the core of all sciences and axioms and simple facts, and at this level everyone is equal, and they don't need each other's advice. Then, after that, they are various in their capabilities and knowledge, as God gave the simplest of people the ability to seek the truth for themselves, without following anybody else in matters of faith, even if they were followers of their masters and dignitaries in other worldly matters. But there is a question: why disbelief is widespread among masters and dignitaries, and peoples of power and authority? The answer is because pride and clinging to the worldly gains are some of the biggest reasons for oppression and staying from goodness, and these are diseases of the heart which can afflict everybody, but are rampant among people of power and authority. Allah, be He exalted, said, "No, but indeed man transgresses because he sees himself self-sufficient." Surah Al-Alaq 6-7. Number 20. Why does God care for the disobedience of an individual on a tiny planet in this vast universe? Answer: why would the person himself get angry when God cares for their disobedience, and doesn't get angry when they see how God takes care of His creation, as tiny as their size in the universe, bestowing on them His gifts of magnificent bodies, equipped with sound veins and arteries, and hearts and brains, livers, kidneys, lungs, and with sight and hearing, and the ability to understand and speak, then created for them bounties of delicious foods and drinks, and made for them spouses and children to enjoy with. Then He sent down the books and the messengers, and made easy for them the sciences that enable them to be masters of this world. And why does this person get angry and bitter, and make of themselves an enemy to God, and denies His existence when a few of these gifts and bounties are taken away from them? Doesn't the same logic they follow tell them that the greater the Creator is, the more this Creator should be neglectful for them? And if praises are given to God for His care and attention to each tiny creature barely seen with the eyes, when He gave them its most suitable structure to their environment, and arranged for that tiny minute creature their most suitable foods and life, why isn't the same, God be praised, when He cares for the actions of humans? And if God said that it's okay for the tiny negligible to kill hundreds and thousands and even millions of other humans, as negligible and insignificant as He is, will God then be praised too? I put in these questions in order to show the futile contradictions in this premise, which tries to imply that God holding humans accountable for their deeds is something inappropriate for a great God, because perfect greatness and capability and knowledge and sovereignty entail that He doesn't neglect anything in His kingdom, small or big, and trying to portray the negligence of the tiny insignificant human as a sign of greatness, and that His care for the deeds of humans is imperfection in God, is a lame attempt that's contradictory to one's mind. In addition, misdeeds like adultery, theft, killing, and other deeds are not trivial things, and humans are not trivial things in this universe, but they are creatures who've been honored by God, and this materialist measurement of triviality and greatness is certainly a kind of stupidity. Because humanity and goodness and morals and beauty and justice and everything that has meaning in people's lives, if we use the same measurement they use, the weight of all of these things will be smaller than that of the tiniest atom in this universe. These are all trivial things in the eyes of materialism. Number 21. Where is the wisdom in killing an apostate? When a questioner asks, why does Islam order the killing of the apostate? When Islam doesn't rely on the number of believers and never fears skepticism? In order to answer this question, there are things that must be made clear first. Firstly, who is an apostate? It's the person who announces their disbelief, as hypocrites are not killed even if their hypocrisy is obvious. As long as a hypocrite doesn't announce their rejection of the faith, they are still externally Muslim and should be treated as one. As for the apostate, they don't only announce their rejection of the faith, but they also invite other people to do the same. Secondly, does Islam kill someone because they are a disbeliever? No. The ones who are born this way are just like anyone of different faith. And those who come to us seeking refuge and safety, their blood is forbidden, as the Prophet's hadith, peace be upon him, shows. Whoever kills a Mahudi, a non-Muslim living under Muslim rule, will not smell the fragrance of paradise, although its fragrance may be detected from a distance of 70 years. In another hadith, if anyone wrongs a Mahudi, distracts from his rights, burdens him with more work than he is able to do, or takes something from him without his consent, I will plead for him, the Mahudi, on the day of resurrection. Thirdly, are the arguments of Islam weak? Never. It's a religion that challenges all humankind with the solidity of its arguments and commands its followers to invite people to Islam by means of intelligent conversations and debates, on the condition that those who do that are well equipped for this purpose and not lay people who aren't professional in the domains of discussion and debate and who have good knowledge of the details of the religion. Fourthly, does Islam care about acquiring great numbers of believers and compels people to convert? No. As Allah says, there shall be no compulsion in acceptance of the religion. The right course has become clear from the wrong. So whoever disbelieves in Taghut and believes in Allah has grasped the most trustworthy handhold with no break in it, and Allah is hearing and knowing. Surah al-Baqarah 256. And it surely allows people of different faiths to practice their rituals and raise their children according to their religions. And there are many Christians and Jews who live in Islamic countries until today. Fifthly, is an apostate killed immediately? No. The state must provide for them professional scholars who discuss the religion with them and clarify everything well, with good treatment, for a few days or more. If the apostate isn't convinced, they're invited to keep their disbelief secret. But if they persist on announcing their disbelief and inviting other people to do the same, then they are killed. 6. Who has the right to kill an apostate? The governor or a delegate of the official state. So why does Islam order to kill an apostate? Islam ordered to kill them, to preserve the rights of others to survive, just like any social system which cares for the well-being of its individuals and the safety of the community. That might take away the rights of some people which were originally bestowed on them. But because of their transgression of other people's rights, just like a killer who'd be killed because they killed people, so is the same with those who target simple people in order to make them skeptic of their religion, announcing their apostasy and talk sweet poison to people in order to make them reject their faith. These cause a lot of damage and destruction, so religious law is protecting the rights of the community to avoid strife and turmoil, which are more destructive than killing. Allah be exalted says, "And kill them wherever you overtake them, and expel them from wherever they have expelled you. And fitna is worse than killing. And do not fight them at al-Masjid al-Haram until they fight you there. But if they fight you, then kill them. Such is the recompense of the disbelievers." Surah al-Baqarah 191. Number 22. Why doesn't Islam allow the freedom to invite people to polytheistic religions in Muslim countries? The answer for that question is based on the understanding of the true difference between truth and falsehood first, as Islam is a religion that doesn't fear discussion or debate because it's the truth and it's the fastest spreading religion in the world, despite all the weakness and tepidity afflicting the nation, especially during the last centuries. So, we rejoice if a non-Islamic country gives more freedom to Muslims or allows the invitation for Islam in its land, But the opposite is incorrect, because how can people who have the truth allow falsehood to be freely invited to their land? Let's have an example to simplify this subject. If a country that legalizes prostitution allows the building and establishment of Islamic preaching centers or mosques on its land, can a sane person say that Islamic countries should do the same by allowing this country the freedom to invite the prostitution and build official brothels? So it's known that inviting to something equals debates plus means. As for debates, the doors are always open whether Muslims like it or not, because they are ordered to invite all people to Islam, and this can't be done except by means of discussions and debates, and for all parties to present their arguments, but on the condition that the Muslims who do this be equipped with the necessary knowledge, as we said before, whether those preachers are present in Islamic countries or other countries. As for the second requirement, the necessary means, Islam obliges its followers to follow certain regulations of justice in their invitation for God, and forbids them of using lies and cheating and deluding others, or engaging in fallacious arguments, or any other kind of injustice. In addition to that, all people must be treated well, without the slightest attempt to coerce people into converting to Islam, and it doesn't ask non-Muslims to abide by the same rules, even as many of them lie and cheat and speak ignorantly of our religion and curse our sacred symbols, and if circumstances permit, they would establish for us Inquisition institutions, as they did to our ancestors in Andalusia. Number 23. Does Islam degrade women? This is one of the most incredible arguments, and I don't know how the enemies of Islam propagated this idea, turning the truth upside down by making honor and veneration look like an offense. Here are some concise answers for the most famous arguments they're propagating, exploiting the ignorance of Muslim laypeople and others. 1. The general Islamic laws address both men and women equally, except for things specific to women in their nature. So if Islam does injustice to women, how come it didn't do the same to men? Number 2. Islam didn't ask the woman to alter her kind emotional nature, to turn her into a deformed, rough creature as they do in the West under the slogan of equality. And that's why it absolved her from the liabilities that need a lot of firmness and resolve, and situations which might bring about hostility, like testimonies related to debt and money transactions, and reconciliation between people, and so on. So it required that the witness of 2 women be equal to 1 man's. So is this injustice or more comfort to her and mitigation of problems where she could meet unnecessary challenges? Whomever thinks that this is an evidence that Islam belittles women's intelligence, we tell them that a liability which requires great intelligence and memory skill like narrating hadith is surely much more important than testimony. As in this case, 1 woman's memorization of the hadith is accepted in Islam. The mother of the believers, Aisha, R.A., is one of the greatest hadith narrators, as it was reported that she narrated and taught more than 2,000 hadiths, and Allah, be He exalted, ordered the Prophet's wives to narrate hadith and narrate the Quran verses exactly the way they are inspired. Allah, be He exalted, said, "And remember what is recited in your houses of the verses of Allah and wisdom. Indeed, Allah is ever subtle and acquainted with all things." Surah Al-Ahzab 34. Number 3. Islam didn't deny a woman's right to work and earn money, but it put regulating conditions for it, like avoiding men's congregations, while women in the West continue to suffer from all kinds of harassment. So, is this protection of a woman or injustice? Number 4. Islam obliges a man to fulfill all of a woman's financial needs and to take care of her, whether she is an unmarried sister, a daughter, a mother, or a wife. But we don't see the West taking care of women unless they are young, and when the expiration date of the Western woman is finished, they are put in elderly care homes or thrown out in the streets without any support, just like any consumer product. Number 5. Islam ordered a woman to cover herself with hijab in order to protect her and her honor from the ill intentions of some men. It didn't deprive her of her natural love for makeup and beauty, but she is to show her beauty only to her husband and certain relatives, who have close bonds with her, and not a cheap exhibition for the mobs. Number 6. A woman can't be married unless she consents, and she has the right to ask for a divorce, or she can even divorce her husband if necessary. Her inheritance shouldn't be touched, as it's her personal right. Number 7. The Prophet, peace and praises be upon him, said in his farewell sermon, "I enjoin you to treat women well, for they are like captives in your hand. Verily, you may not treat them otherwise unless they commit flagrant immorality. If they do so, then you may separate from their beds and strike them without causing pain. But if they return to good conduct, then you may do nothing against them. You have rights over your wives, and they have rights over you. Your right is that they will not allow anyone you dislike to enter your home, and their right is that you should treat them well regarding food and clothing. Number 8. Striking one's wife by hitting her, erroneously imagined to be wife-beating, is only for the wife who abuses the marriage life and who doesn't heed any advice. But deviated people imagine that it's the first thing a man has the right to do when any conflict happens, as if all Muslim husbands are beating their wives all day and all night. When God made it the third and last resort when no advice or separating beds work, as Allah, be He exalted, says, men are in charge of women by right of what Allah has given one over the other, and what they spend for maintenance for their wealth. So righteous women are devoutly obedient, guarding in the husband's absence what Allah would have them guard. But those wives from whom you fear arrogance, first advise them. Then, if they persist, forsake them in bed, and finally strike them. But if they obey you once more, seek no means against them. Indeed, Allah is ever exalted and grand. Surah Al-Nisa 34. The Prophet even put conditions for this striking. It shouldn't be beating, and as mentioned in the farewell sermon, it shouldn't be painful, and it shouldn't hurt or leave a mark, because it's a punishment, but only an action that warns her against the danger of her attitude, and the fading away of the affection and tranquility this attitude causes, which are the basic foundations of a Muslim home. Number 9. A man will be held accountable for everyone he's responsible for, and he's obliged to educate religion to his children and help everybody in the house doing good deeds and live a good life. He's also obliged to strive in the cause of Allah and to seek money in righteous ways in order to fulfill his family's financial needs. But a woman's path to heaven is much easier. The Prophet, peace and praises be upon him, said, when a woman praises her 5 prayers, fasts her month of Ramadan, guards her chastity, and obeys her husband, then it will be said to her, enter paradise from whichever gate you wish. And this obedience to the husband is associated with the obedience to God. But she has the right to refuse anything he says that's not in accordance with Islam's teachings. As the Prophet said, there is no disobedience to the creation in the disobedience of the Creator. Number 10. Islam ordered a man to treat his wife as part of him, to feed her of his food and buy her the clothes she needs, and never say a bad word to her, not to strike her face or leave her in bed, as shown in Hadith. What right can any wife demand of her husband? He replied. You should give her food when you eat, clothe her when you clothe yourself, not strike on her the face, and do not revile her or separate from her except in the house. Number 24. False signal. If a group of people agreed to do a secret mission and agreed to a starting signal, that the boss scratches his head 3 consecutive times, but unfortunately for them, the boss gets a real itch and he couldn't stop himself from scratching his head 3 consecutive times, which caused them to start the mission at the wrong time, and consequently, the mission failed. This is a false signal. I called it signal because it's not purposeful. It doesn't have a real objective meaning by itself, just like all the words and codes we use, as there is no casual relationship between scratching one's head and starting secret missions. And I called it false because it doesn't convey the desired message agreed between the parties. An atheist perceives religion as something that doesn't have a real objective meaning, because to them, if it wasn't for the religious scholars and the religious fools, there wouldn't be any necessary need that calls for religion with all its foundations and details and rituals. In their eyes, it's a false sign that doesn't contain within it any real meaning or benefit, but it exists only because of the false pretensions of the religious people, which they see as delusions, or mental suggestions, or anything else. But in the end, it's something useless and valueless which doesn't contain any truth. But the biggest problem with an atheist is that they continuously talk about the importance of knowledge, and work, and civilization and human rights, or even talk about drugs and sex, forgetting all these things are also false signals, because that's the use of knowledge, and studying this universe and harnessing the forces of nature. Does this give us more luxury? What's the use of the existence or absence of comfort and luxury in our lives? After all, these are all silly electric signals in our brains, which we were haphazardly brought about by the blind mechanisms of nature during our evolutionary journey. What is the objective difference one gets from having the company of the most attractive woman in the world or the ugliest, or to get nothing at all? What is the meaning of beauty and pleasure when everything is founded on false signals? You could fall in love with a fly if your ancestors didn't take a different evolutionary course that made you love blue eyes instead of red ones, and soft hair instead of harmonious antennas, and accumulated fats in the breast instead of the slenderness and strength of wings. A believer, on the other hand, sees all life with everything in it as a false sign. The world just exists for us to enjoy its pleasures, and there is nothing in it that's meaningful in and of itself. Everything in life, whether big or small, are destined to nothingness, and the only true and meaningful life that exists is life after death. It's the only life we have. It's even the only reason that gives anything meaning. Because if we are the children of this material world, the word of meaning itself wouldn't have a meaning in the first place. Both teams see that there is something worth living for, and that there's something that doesn't have any meaning or worth living for. It's a false sign. But the atheist's choice, in fact, makes both these things a false sign. Number 25. Can humans think that they are the product of a deterministic and materialist process, led by Darwinian evolution, and at the same time think that they are humans who both enjoy and are endowed with values and morals which matter doesn't possess? I think the life of George R. Price answers this question well. George R. Price is an American scientist who has important contributions to many different fields: physics, chemistry, programming, and biology, to the point that he was nominated for different Nobel Prizes in 4 completely different fields. He was a very ferocious atheist who vehemently opposed everything metaphysical or supernatural, and a very loyal materialist. This caused the destruction of his family and his divorce from his Catholic wife, leaving her with their 2 daughters while he left for London in 1957. During his stay in London, he read a short scientific article written by W.D. Hamilton and published in a Nature magazine. The article was a foundation to the solution of one of the greatest dilemmas facing the evolution theory: the question of how altruism appears and continues to exist when it contradicts natural selection. Hamilton's paper, who is considered to be the greatest biologist after Darwin, was just a simple idea, and he didn't even mention a single reference for his idea. So Price put a mathematical equation describing Hamilton's idea about the natural selection of close relatives, which even included the famous axiom of survival of the fittest. That was the moment when the world began to speak of Price's genius, especially after he and Maynard Smith applied the game theory to the biological systems in 1972. But what was even more incredible is that right after Price, the militant atheist, put his famous equation, and as the world began to applaud his genius for the first time, he surprised everyone with a strange announcement. That is, his equation could have been easily discovered by anyone else, and that it was a wonderful inspiration and a gift from God. Soon after that, Price converted to evangelical Christianity. In actuality, Price's equation says that what we regard as pure altruism is in fact selfishness that's concordant with natural selection. And this is what Richard Dawkins described later with colloquial language in his book, The Selfish Gene. And this means that ethical morals never existed, and that pure materialism governs everything. This is a conclusion that Price never accepted, and he spent the rest of his life trying to overcome his equation, but he unfortunately couldn't. Price used to go out into the streets of London, searching for homeless people in order to give them food and money, and he even used to take them to his house until his house became filled with them. Then he donated everything he had to the poor and became homeless, sleeping in the streets and cleaning public toilets until he committed suicide in 1975. Price did all that to prove to himself that he's a human being, and that the motivation that drives him is a non-materialist, ethical, and spiritual one, and to prove to himself that he's much more than what natural selection and materialism are saying about him. Today, atheists speak day and night of the perfect harmony between materialism philosophy. Price must have understood the materialist natural selection theory, or is it possible that atheists don't really understand what humanity really means? Number 26. Does a disbeliever have a right to refuse going through this test, whose outcome is an eternity in hell? The test itself is not the reason of the failure of those who failed, but rather it's just a reason to show and reveal their failure. It's like a criminal who would criticize the police for revealing his crime and says, "I'm in prison because of the damn police," forgetting that the police only revealed his crime, and it wasn't the reason why he committed it. As long as the test was suitable for the capacities of the students, and as long as they were given absolute freedom to write what they wish without anyone forcing them, then it's a fair test. And if it's a fair test, and that the test wasn't in itself the reason of the failure of these students, so where is the injustice then? The test didn't change anything in the results, but it only revealed those results, and that's why it can never be unfair. In other words, no one fails because they were tested, but because of their unwillingness to seek and employ the available causes of success. And just like a lazy student doesn't have the right to refuse a test that would reveal their failure, a disbeliever also doesn't have the right to refuse a test that will show their ungrateful and criminal attitude. And whomever thinks that it's unfair to come to this worldly test because they weren't given the choice in the beginning, and that that's a good excuse for him in front of God, is just like a man who's presented at court with the charge of murdering all the passengers and raping women on a train. And when the judge asks him why he committed all those crimes, he said that he did because he didn't choose to be on that train from the beginning, because he was on the wrong platform, and that all the things he did weren't crimes because he didn't choose that train. And consequently, he doesn't deserve punishment for the evil he did, or praised for the good things he did.
Oh